When we're looking at building a price on value, we work with customers to look at all three of these things. We look at revenue gain, we look at cost reduction, and we look at emotional contribution. I go into that in a lot more detail in the book, but that is the approach to pricing. It's not as easy as adding up the costs and adding a markup factor, but it's a much more rational and it's a more successful approach and generates better profits for you as well.
Hi, I'm Nishant Garg with WhatMarketWants. My guest for today specializes in pricing strategy. He has worked with companies all around the world. He has been a visiting faculty at a business school in Scotland. He's the co-author of the book Value-Based Pricing. Let's welcome Harry Macdivitt. Hi.
Hello, Nishant, and it's really lovely to be here today. And hello to everyone who is watching. I hope you can understand me. I am Scottish, and I'm afraid I speak Scottish.
I like that. I like diversity. So tell me, from a medical rep to one of the finest pricing consultant in the industry, how did that happen? Could you walk us through your journey?
It's a very nice compliment, Nishant, and wholly undeserved. I'm very proud to be one of a small number of very well-known pricing consultants. And I have worked, as you say, in many, many countries and with many companies, big and small. I suppose I started my career before medical rep. I was a medical scientist for a number of years, and I got fairly bored with that fairly quickly and decided that maybe the best thing to do was to become a salesman. And as I worked in sales, I realized that one of the biggest issues that most salespeople don't really understand is how to identify and present customer value, or at least value to customers. So it's all about understanding what you are selling to your customers and how it works in their lives, rather than trying to present scientific facts and figures and information. And I found that customers much prefer to know what they're buying, but also why they're buying and how that impacts with their life. And from there, I went into medical devices and was involved in the marketing of the very first medical laser system in the world. And that too was very interesting because it was an interplay between science, technology, marketing, and sales. But again, underpinning all of that was the understanding that value was the key issue here. And at that time, surgeons didn't really have anything other than very basic tools to help them. And our laser system helped refine greatly different types of surgery. So that was great fun. Then a few years later into business consultancy. So I've worked with small, medium and large companies in marketing and business strategy. And I really understand, because I've set up many small companies of my own. So I understand the problems of startup, the problems of growth, the problems of trying to make an impact on a very competitive world with very large competitors. And again, the answer to these issues is in value. Value is underpinning success in all of those things. So moving into pricing was a fairly obvious thing to do. Basically being trained mathematically, it helped a little bit.
All right. So you started as a medical scientist. That's fascinating. So tell me, isn't price setting just figuring out the cost and adding a percentage to it?
Yeah. Do you know what, Nishant? That's something that a lot of people think is the case. And it's a very, very reasonable thing to do, because after all, what else would you do if you didn't have a better system? You would look at what it costs you to make something, and then you would say, what should I take as my profit? And so you add a percentage onto that, and hey presto, you've got profit. And while that looks very good on a profit and loss account, the reality is that it often forces you into a situation where you are obliged to discount simply because you haven't captured what really matters to the customer, this thing we call value. So many companies who do this cost plus approach to pricing don't succeed very well because they haven't captured the essence of what it is that they're selling. So what do? In order to gain a share of a market, they drop the price. And if that doesn't work, they drop the price again. And before they know it, they're not making any profit at all, and they're out of business. And this is particularly the problem for very small companies, where it can be very tempting to do that to compete against the bigger organizations. But for those of you who are listening today, that is absolutely the wrong approach to take. Completely the wrong approach. It will bankrupt you.
So how many companies do you come across that are losing money due to flawed pricing?
Dozens and dozens. It's one of the very first things I ask them to do is to tell me what their price approach is. And they tell me. And then I say, okay, so now show me your profit. And with great reluctance, they show me. And then sometimes with tears in their eyes, they say, what can I do? What can I do to get out of this situation? Well, the answer is start thinking, stop counting.
Could you give us a few examples of any companies?
Well, you realize that as a consultant, I can't really talk about specific organizations. There are many companies who have operated on a cost plus basis. And to be fair, sometimes they are successful, sometimes it works, and it tends to work if they can keep their costs very low. So some very large companies operate on a cost basis because they are able to keep their unit cost to a minimum. And if they price at or around the market level, that gives them a profit margin. And so, and many of the big supermarkets do this, and many large commodity type organizations. I won't give you names of organizations because I think that would be a little bit dangerous, but that's the kind of organization, as well as very small businesses who don't have the sophistication of a better approach. I don't know if that's helpful to you, Nishant, but I think that's about as far as I can go.
Okay, all right. So what do you think about companies that offers discounts regularly?
Well, I would like to think they know what they're doing. If they are offering discounts regularly, then presumably it's working for them. But if you are playing in this game, you need to keep a very, very close eye on your costs, not just the cost of making, marketing, manufacturing, and distributing your product, but also the ability of your salespeople to negotiate effectively. In order to win their bonuses, many salespeople just immediately discount when they encounter opposition from their customers. So they immediately discount by 5, 10, 15%. Sometimes the customer asks for more, and sometimes they get more. The best salespeople don't enter into that discount negotiation situation. They really try to understand what their customers really need in the way of a product, what actually represents value to them of the product that they're selling. And when they do that, they realize they actually don't need to give away discounts. In fact, they might even be able to price their products higher than those of the competition because their products are better. What's really quite horrifying, and I've seen this in some small to medium-sized technology-based businesses, is that they have a wonderful product, but they sell it at rock bottom prices. And of course, if you think about that for a moment, the proposition is in conflict. How can you offer such a wonderful product with some great features at such a low price? Well, the answer is you can't. Somewhere something has to go. You are either not believed and your product doesn't sell because of that, or you do sell and you run out of capital or run out of cash. So it is a zero-win game. You just don't succeed in that situation.
Okay. So in your view, what's the right way of pricing your products and services?
Okay, well, in my book, I've talked about maybe 9 or 10 different ways of pricing a product. But in my view, the approach that I think is becoming increasingly popular is that of value-based pricing. In value-based pricing, what you do is you try to understand the value of the product to the customer. Now, that actually does require quite a lot of work. We talk about a thing we call the value triad, Nishant, and the value triad is 3 things. The first of these things is, we call it revenue gain. So anything that our product can do, or service that can do to increase our customers' revenue, anything that the customer can gain a price increase on, that's revenue gain. The second thing that we look at is, how can our product help customers save costs, cut costs? And of course, you realize that if you do both of those things, if you enable your customer to increase the price and also reduce their costs, then what you've got is a prescription for increased profitability. But that's not the whole story, because there's another piece of this argument which a lot of people forget about, and that is the feel-good factor. How can we ensure that our customers are comfortable and happy with the proposition they've got? We call that emotional contribution, because it's a contribution that customers' emotion can make to the acceptability of the product. And when we're looking at building our price on value, we work with customers to look at all 3 of these things. We look at revenue gain, we look at cost reduction, and we look at emotional contribution. I go into that in a lot more detail in the book, but that is the approach to pricing. It's not as easy as adding up the costs and adding a markup factor, but it's a much more rational and it's a more successful approach and generates better profits for you as well.
So you mentioned value several times. What do you mean by value?
Well, I think I've just said it. Value is anything, it's the combination of revenue gain, cost reduction, and emotional contribution. We call that the value triad. So just to repeat it, it's anything that can help our customers improve their revenues. So that might encourage them to sell more, or it might enable them to increase the price. Anything that we can do to help our customers reduce costs by making our product more efficient, more effective, by identifying ways that our product or service can contribute to their manufacturing costs or the distribution costs, and anything that we can do to help our customers deliver a proposition that is more satisfying and more emotionally attractive to their customers.
All right. So you talk about emotion. How do you put a value to emotion? How do you measure that?
That's a super question, Nishant. It really is. And the answer is no, you can't, not directly. There are ways of doing this indirectly. This is one of what we call the intangibles of pricing. What clever people, clever mathematical people, are able to use interesting tools like, for instance, conjoint analysis to be able to infer the economic value of a particular product feature or service feature. Now that's an approach that a few people have applied, some successfully, some not so successfully. But that's one way of doing it. The other way, perhaps, is really to try to get an understanding from the customer themselves of what the value of the product actually is to them in their environment. So, for example, if you are selling a device that helps improve the quality of water that is in a lake, then you can't really measure the value of that because it's aesthetic. It's about safety. It's about ensuring that there is comfort in people who are using the lake, using the water from the lake. I only use that as an example because right now I'm working with a company looking at that kind of thing. And I can give you a lot more examples of that, but that will have to suffice for the moment. And incidentally, that is a very, very small technology-based company.
All right. Could you give us examples of any other brands that you don't work with, but they follow the principles of value-based pricing?
Yes. Yes, I won't give you names of companies. I know lots of names of companies, but I can give you sectors. For instance, we've done some work with pharmaceuticals and biotechnology sectors, and the profits that they can make based around value-based pricing are phenomenal. I mean, they are massive, principally because of the value that they are able to identify as part of the product that they're offering. I know of travel companies who have manage their product in such a way as it offers really excellent guidance and help to the traveling business person. They price their products, their services on value. There's a very large international electronics company who use value-based pricing across several of the divisions. I was privileged to work with them a few years ago, and they're in the electronics component sector. And again, when you start to look at the benefits, the economic benefits that just economic benefits alone that these products can offer, they were amazed that they were not using value-based pricing previously. There are organizations in the telecommunications sector, both in the sale of telecommunications services, but also in the hardware that supports telecoms products. Again, I've worked with a number of companies, large companies in that sector. In some cases, they're a bit reluctant to move to value-based pricing because their legacy approach has been cost-based pricing, but they experiment with it and they're finding that there are advantages. And I think this is one of the problems of moving from a legacy cost-based approach to pricing to value-based pricing. It's a very political situation, pricing, and people don't want to make a mistake in how they're pricing their products. So they will tend to stick with what is tried and tested rather than take a risk on something else. But when you are introducing this to, let's say, a big corporation, you start with one part of the corporation and experiment with it. And if it works there, then you move it on from there.
Interesting. What about small companies? They often struggle demanding a higher price. What can they do about it?
Yeah. First of all, do not be intimidated by the big competitors. At the end of the day, it's about the relationship that you as a supplier have with your customer. And it's also about how effective your product is at meeting the clear needs of the customer. Some of the big organizations don't bother too much about building relationships. It's a case of selling as quickly as they can for as much as they can and then moving on. To me, customer service is an important component of value. And in my experience, the smaller companies tend to be closer to the decision makers and therefore understand better the specific needs of their customers, perhaps to a better extent than the larger organizations. And I don't mean that in any way to be critical of big companies, because there are really some super companies out there who do a really, really good job of selling. But the issue is understanding the needs of your customer, understanding what's important in their context, understanding how they're going to make use of the product and how that product or service is going to generate benefits, economic and emotional, to them as they use these products. So yeah, there's that whole thing that I've talked about there is a thing we call value-based selling. And value-based selling and value-based pricing go hand in hand. You can't really successfully build a value-based price unless you sell it on the basis of value. And so understanding your customers' needs fully puts you in a much, much better position to build and present a powerful value proposition to your customer.
It's very clear talking to you that pricing is not just a finance thing, and it falls under the territory of branding and marketing as well. So tell me, how does the company find out if their price is too high or too low?
They ask their customers. If customers walk away and go somewhere else, there's something wrong. Either the product was wrong for the purpose, and that's a developmental issue, or it was sold in a manner that did not truly reflect the actual benefits of the product. So the customers become dissatisfied and unhappy, or the price was too high to begin with, without adequate explanation of why it should be too high. Sometimes the price is too low, and people just simply don't believe that the product that is being presented to them could be presented at such a ludicrously low price. But the thing to do really is speak to customers. I did a survey, well, in fact, a project a couple of years ago with a professional, what would I describe it as? A professional society, trying to understand how their customers viewed the value that was being delivered. And for the very first time ever, which I spoke to about 30 of their customers across the world, and discovered that there was one underlying factor. And the one underlying factor was that they didn't really know what the professional society was offering them. They didn't really understand the offer. Well, they've changed that, and now they are presenting a really fantastic offer, and the results are good. So you need to speak to your customers, listen to what they're saying, not just hear what you would like them to say, but hear what they actually are saying. And if you do that, you're not going to go too far wrong.
It is sort of in line with the show's name, What Market Wants, listening to the customers.
You're quite right.
All right. So how different is it to price a product versus pricing a service?
Well, some people would tell you that there is no difference between the pricing of a product and the pricing of a service. Actually, I think from a value point of view, there's actually quite a lot of difference. The product is an intrinsic piece of equipment or a piece of hardware or something that is tangible. You can lift it up in your hands, you can look at it, you can feel it, you can measure it, you can weigh it, and so on and so on. And then you can put it to the test and you can use it. But it is what it is. In my view, it only becomes a product once you add to it customer service. So that customer service could be how the product is presented, how it is used, how you can extend its application across different areas, how you can learn how to use it better, how it fits into other things that you may have. Now, that's where you've got a product plus service combination. And you can price that in value, and you will find that the service component of it can probably yield better profits than the actual hardware that you're selling. Now, if you're selling services, pure services, then that's a little bit more difficult. The component that relates to emotional contribution typically is a little bit higher, or perhaps even a big bit higher, because in delivering a service, you have a service agent, whoever that might be, working directly with an individual who is consuming that service. And you then need to truly understand what that individual's needs are so that you can construct that offer to him face to face. So very often the service proposition is created in combination with the customer. Don't ever do this in isolation, because you'll get it wrong. you will have a view of what the customer wants, when in reality, the customer wants something completely and totally different. So in pricing a service, you need, again, to understand the revenue gains and cost reduction issues. But even more importantly than that, if it's possible to say that, you need to consider the real, actual, intrinsic, hands-on worth that you're delivering to the customer to make him or to enable him to be better at doing the job that he's trying to do with your service.
Very interesting. So what drove you to write your book, Value-Based Pricing?
That's quite an interesting story, actually. I delivered training courses on marketing strategy, and then pricing. And over the years, I moved, without even realizing it, more and more towards value-based pricing. And one day I wakened up and realized I was actually training people in value-based pricing, but I just didn't call it that. And the realization was actually reinforced when a few people in one of my training courses in London said, "Harry, we can't find anything about value-based pricing in the literature. We can't find any books on value-based pricing. Sure, the Harvard Business Review and some of the other great journals had articles on value-based pricing, but it hadn't been turned into a book." And I thought, why don't I write it? So I did.
Wow. So is it safe to call you one of the fathers of value-based pricing?
Oh, now steady on. I might look old, but I'm not. No,
So tell me.
I don't think I would care to call that. There was somebody that once said, if I have been able to see further, it's because I have stood on the shoulders of giants. And there are giants in value-based pricing, and people for whom I have the utmost respect and admiration. So no, I wouldn't call myself a father. I might consider myself to be a grandson or maybe a son of these gurus. But no, please don't call me a grandfather.
So tell me, lastly, what are your favorite marketing and branding books?
Oh, golly. Well, my own, for starters. I have it right here.
Oh, nice.
But there are many, and I think it would be invidious to separate out any particular one as being my preference. I think Philip Kotler's books I've always enjoyed and always admired. I think he is a true genius in his approaches to marketing, and he was one of the very, very first ones. He was a professor at the Kellogg School in America, and he has written several books on marketing, on marketing strategy, and others. I think I couldn't not comment on Mike Porter's stuff. Obviously, Competitive Advantage is his flagship book, and he truly was an excellent author and researcher. He's a prof at Harvard, as probably most of your audience will know, and has written a number of very, very insightful books, and I have them on my bookshelf. You might just be able to see one of them in the background to this. Somebody that I was very pleased to meet a number of years ago while I was working in Boston, was a chap called Bradley Gale. Bradley, I probably would describe him as a grandfather of pricing, maybe a grandfather of value. He wrote a book called I think it was just simply called Customer Value. And a lot of the ideas that Bradley came up with, I took them on and modified them a little for my own purposes. What other authors can I think of? Well, if I had notice of that question, I'd probably have given you about 20 others. And my apologies to the very great people that I haven't mentioned. But these are three whose books I am proud to have on my bookshelf.
Wow. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Harry. Seriously, thanks a lot for your time.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Nishant, for the invitation. And all I can say to your watchers here is thank you for listening and think about value.
You all must check out his book, Value-Based Pricing. You'll find the link in the description. To get more such great insights from the world of business, branding, and marketing, subscribe, follow What Market Wants on social media, and let me help you unlock your market potential. Take care.